back to another episode of Builders of the Broken Bazaar. I'm your host, Dr. Tabish Zaman. Every day, we touch technology without touching the world it shapes. We all know how we scroll through the feeds, which are built by people we will never meet. They use data we never agreed to give, and again, filtered through values we never consented to. Now, behind every app and every infrastructure, there is an architecture of power, an architecture deciding what we fear, what we believe, and guess what? Even what we forget. Now, the danger today isn't that systems are failing in and around us. It's that they are working exactly as they intended. And that imbalance of power is staggering. I'll give you some stats. Last year, 91% of the global AI funding, it went to companies in the US and China. While the entire regions, Africa, Middle East, South Asia, they received less than 2%. Meanwhile, over 60% of all AI data set, it still comes from the Western English-speaking population, despite representing barely 15% of the world. Now, what does it all mean? What's the result of it? As we can see, bias. Bias has become the infrastructure. Inequality, as we all see in and around us, is fully automated. And injustice is playing at a global scale. But guess what? Every now and then there comes a voice which refuses to accept that infrastructure, that inequality, and that injustice. My guests today are two brothers who are doing exactly that. They're the founders of Thaura AI, a platform built not for Silicon Valley, not for surveillance capitalism, but for liberation movement, marginalized community, and the oppressed. Thaura in Arabic means revolution, is an AI built to break that imbalance, to give people the intelligence and organizing power that government and corporations have held for generations. So while most AI companies, they're building tools for profit, these brothers are building tools for agency, which is a very important word here on this podcast. So while others, they keep chasing valuation, these two brothers have been chasing the actual truth. And while tech giants, they talk about ethics, if you look at their press releases, Taura is actually practicing those ethics in the field, in real conflict zones, in real timelines, and with real stakes. Because their work begins with a very simple but a radical question. What if technology didn't belong to the powerful? What if it belonged to the people? Hani and Said, welcome to Builders of the Broken Bazaar.
Oh, what an amazing intro, man. Yeah. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much. So, shall we?
The stat you've mentioned with the 90%, I have to put that in my bag because it's a good stat to have. If you look at the world, it's not just broken. It was engineered to be that way. And big tech didn't design or create the surveillance architecture by accident. It was deliberately built to, like you've mentioned, to benefit the few and exploit the most. And we see it in every algorithm. We see it in censorship. We see it when data gets exploited. And our counter initiative is Thaura, which is a AI platform that is putting the people over the profits and actually building a tool of liberation instead of a tool of oppression.
I think you rightly mentioned, and given what you're doing, because the world we are all building isn't hypothetical. It's happening right in front of us. And again, if we look at some of the numbers, which is very, very interesting, because again, last year, post October 7th, we are seeing more people living under some form of digital surveillance, despite talking about democracy. Again, some of the governments as well, they've deployed AI tools against protesters, against journalists, against activists. And we all know sort of in major conflicts, and when we look at all this sort of back and forth misinformation, they really spread so fast. So my question to you is, you both grew up witnessing that imbalance, which I feel is coming from the work which you're doing, the cost of injustice, the power of, sort of information asymmetry, if I call it. So I want to go directly and ask this to you. Do you think Thaura was born out of anger, out of necessity? Or what do you think? Is it out of hope? Or was it a reaction to a system which you don't want to accept?
Yeah, That's a very good question. And short answer, yes. Now let me elaborate on that, which is me and my brother, we were both born in Syria. Yeah, so we were both born in Syria and we were raised there until I was 8 years old and Said was 10 years old. And we left Syria shortly before the war started to happen in 2000. And when we came to Syria, to Germany, because we moved to Germany, it felt like we just entered a time machine and went back to the future. Because we've seen modern cars, clean streets, everything's being organized. I can go to the supermarket and there's a queue without anyone like taking my spot. This was a miracle for us. And we felt appreciation, but we also felt like we had a privilege. And we started to question, why is this not also going on in Syria? Why is this injustice going on? And then you start looking into the world and you see how dark it is. Every big systems are really controlled by corporates or by systems that are really benefiting themselves instead of benefiting the few. And with all this knowledge we had, we just wanted to have an impact in the world. And that's actually why we got into tech. It was not because we were passionate in it. That was actually not the case at all. We were passionate in a lot of stuff, but in tech. But we live in a digital era and everyone is on a digital device and lives in a digital world more than in the actual world. Like I have a neighbor, Said, you know who I'm talking about. We know him since like 10 years and whenever he leaves the house, he's on his phone. And he even has a wife, a cute baby and a dog, but he's still always on this phone. And I'm just thinking to myself that the platforms he's working on, the algorithms that are built, he doesn't know who has built them and what hidden agenda is behind it and what possibility for controlling is there. And that's the reason why we decided to get into tech, because we realized that this is a way to impact many in the whole world. So we taught ourselves programming and we got a job in a corporate in Germany as a IT provider for the pharmaceutical industry. But once we were in that job, we were not actually doing what we were. It was not going hand in hand with the intention of us getting into tech. We were actually just climbing the corporate ladder and actually supporting the systems that are going against our systems. And then you think about, because this was actually in 2024, so the thing was going on in Palestine, and now the Syrian revolution happened, which is called the Thaura. And this was the call that led us to build Thaura. We felt like we had to do something ourselves. And you look at the tech industry, it's super dark. You need to do something. Thank God there are some alternatives. When you look at WhatsApp, for example, there's Signal. When you look at Google, there's the Brave browser. But for AI, the platform that everyone is using right now, everything is being built on right now, there was no real alternative. And my auntie, she talks to ChatGPT much more than anyone I know. And she looks for guidance with ChatGPT. And I'm telling her auntie, like, you're giving her ChatGPT all your conversations and everything. And she doesn't know the actual value of her data and the value of supporting these systems. So this was really heartbreaking. And me and Said, as tech experts, we took the leap and we took a open source LLM, which was DeepSeek at that moment, and we just hosted it and we gave it to our auntie. And she was like, cool, now I can talk to Thaura, but I can't upload any images. I was like, auntie, okay, we'll do this feature. And then we added this feature. And then another feature came. And then it turned out that a lot of people needed this. And we started establishing ourselves as the ethical alternative to ChatGPT, meaning we don't collect any data. We build everything on sustainable infrastructure. And we give out truthful responses and have no hidden agenda.
Also, real quick, if I can just add a little bit to the story, because I think this is very important. The company we were working with, the primary IT provider, we work for a company called Procter & Gamble, which is the biggest pharmaceutical company in the world. And we were handling millions of data sets, if not billions. And we were responsible for these data sets. So it was very interesting how much data could impact the world. We had access to data sets that really go in great depth. And the person that would have access to these data sets, it is pretty obvious that the more data you have, the more predictions you can make on the future. Coming with this and AI sort of like starting off, I went to my head of engineering back then and I told them, this new tool is out there, ChatGPT. What do you think? Should we implement it? We would have maybe better natural language queries for the user and they would have a better user experience. And he was like, okay, this sounds very promising. Okay, but don't forget, we are in Europe. And can you just tell me where all of this data is heading at? And I was telling them, yeah, this company is called OpenAI, and they're located in the US, and all of the data is flowing into OpenAI, and we don't know what they're doing with it. So we started conducting some research and finding out that OpenAI, specifically back then, because they weren't as popular, didn't have any privacy policy.
Yeah.
They were literally just taking the data to train them on, which is, in a sense, also a little bit understandable because you're a little startup. You're still not really set up. It was at the moment where GPT 3.5 was out, and but he immediately rejected it, and he said there is no way we have to do it. So me doing a little bit of research, we figured out there are alternatives. There are some open source LLMs. Back then it was Llama 3, and there were also like concepts like homomorphic encryption, which is sort of like the end-to-end encryption alternative to AI. Because you can't just like throw in cipher data into an LLM because you will not be able to figure this out. So these were like pretty impressive concepts, but we were like, okay, let us start with using open source models. But they were not providing the same quality as a GPT 3.5. Imagine back then how bad GPT 3.5 was, comparing it to Llama 3.1. And so this started like the immediate research into, okay, how can you be not dependent on these companies? And with time, more and more open source elements arrived. When we saw that, when the whole Palestine movement started and actually expanded and reached mainstream, we quickly figured out that Procter & Gamble is one of the biggest Zionist supporters in the world. And we were like, okay, this is quite interesting. And we are at a stage where we're pretty young. We don't have major responsibilities such as wives and kids. And why not? Like at 24 and 26, back then 25 and 23, why not just take the leap? We are in Germany. What's the worst that can happen if we just start to change the world a little bit? And we thought, okay, let us make something that has been done before, make AI not dependent on big tech. And there was a competitor that supposedly would not be dependent on big tech. They're Mistral. They're located in France. They seemed in the beginning very promising, but you can immediately see the moment they started gaining a little bit of traction, they immediately started attracting Israeli VCs and now have major contracts with Palantir, Microsoft, Google, and AWS. So who is left now? So you have the West and you have China, and we don't know what China is doing. So we just wanted somebody that is not dependent on sort of capital gain, that is not there for just achieving pure profits, and somebody that actually wants to make a difference. So in the sense of, yes, it was a little bit of anger that drove it, but also a little bit of necessity, because we thought there is nobody doing that. And if there was somebody doing that, we would probably do something else, but there isn't anybody doing it. So here we are.
I think that's what excites me really about what you both are doing is, how young you both are. And it's amazing. And again, I don't mean to say in a patronizing way, but in terms of how exciting this is and how early you've caught on to that issue where there's so much of an imbalance. So suddenly when you look at Thaura, it doesn't feel like a startup at all, because I feel it is more like a response, it is more like a moral intervention. And I'm so keen to find out more about what Thaura is all about. And that was a fabulous backstory. But before I go into all of that, I'm really interested in you two as brothers, the human side of it, because I want to pause and sort of understand you, not as founders, which you're doing fabulously well, but as brothers. So again, something like this doesn't come out of theory, it is, again, this is where I say it is so exciting because you both are young, but you built it from an experience, you built it from memory, a sense of responsibility, which comes so much later as we talk about. We've seen so many things, but what were you doing before this? Like, how was your relationship? How does it go? Your trust, how do you disagree with yourself? Tell me a bit about that.
Oh my God, we disagree so much. Like we've reached a point where, so just for a little bit of background, I handle technical responsibilities and Hani Fungate serve as the communicator and business. And he literally does everything else. Like without him, I'm super grateful to have somebody like him on the team. So, but in that sense, because I handle, for example, technical responsibilities, sometimes we disagree on specific features that should be updated. And we disagree so much where I just ignore, for example, sometimes his opinion and just push to production. And this leads, of course, to conflict. And the same thing goes from his side when it comes to marketing. Sometimes I told him not to post something, but he still posts it because he's convinced with it. But in the sense, what I'm trying to say here is, even though we make a lot of mistakes, I think the great thing about this relationship is we are family, and we know, like, even if the worst thing happens, we're always going to stick together. And hopefully this also sort of, we try to communicate also this relationship to the whole ethical community. I mean, we all need to stick together, and if family cannot stick together, how is supposed a community stick together? I think that is my response to that.
Yeah, I mean, actually, he really just downplayed what he does because this is the man that actually built Thaura. He built everything. We were both software engineers and we just left, and both of us were leading major projects in our last job, but he didn't allow me to touch the code base. So I had little brother duty to do. He was big brother saying, get your butt over to marketing, everything else. And I do the code base, and he's been grinding every single day. He's doing more all-nighters than anyone I know. I mean, he's the one that built Taura, so don't play your work like that side.
No, but not.
And
That shows the humility. But I think in a way you both are very lucky, because when you look at a typical journey of a successful venture, often you look out for partners. You look out for a collaboration. You look out for people who could be on the same values as you are, or be on the same sort of, at least the mindset, the entrepreneurial mindset. But I think that way you found that solace amongst yourselves. You two are brothers, of course, you come from the same values. But in terms of going back a bit, technology wise, were you both always aligned to technology that way? You always felt this is something which excited you? This is something. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a little, yes, we were always into technology in the sense of we were using technology.
We were playing video games.
Yeah, video games. We love video games. We were grinders, especially this guy. I mean, we started like, we received our first phone when we were like 13, with like a small Samsung Galaxy. I don't know, this one. I don't know. I'm not sure. It was like it was definitely a touch smartphone.
Mhm.
And we used to have like Nintendos and PSPs, and we were always into games. But the reason why sort of this whole technical journey started, we were never like educated in tech. We were not educated in tech at all. It was just like a response that, okay, what can we do that is most impactful in the world, and that has sort of it's also like a money correlation, because you thought to yourself, okay, which job earns the most? Obviously, the job that has the most impact. So, okay, we were looking at which job has the most impact. And one thing like really was obvious, it's that every single person in the world, nearly, rule of thumb, is technically connected. I mean, they all have smartphones or use desktop devices. So it was obvious that if you learn this magical language that can write software, if you can learn this, learn this magical language, which is software, you are able to impact every single person in the world if you do it right. And I think this was like the call out that, okay, we need to do something with software.
Yeah, certainly. And you've arrived that way. But didn't someone tell you that startup or setting up something like this is very difficult? Where did that inspiration come from?
Yeah, unfortunately, now I say unfortunately, but it was nobody that explicitly told us that this is difficult or we should do this and this has such amount of impact. But we were really impacted by social media. And we were seeing people like Elon Musk achieving like great impact. At the time when we read about him, he was actually like a good person, we thought. But it turned out later that, well, I think we all know how things are turning out right now with him. So, no, you know that it was difficult from social media telling us that it's one of the hardest things to do, and only like maybe like 1,000 startups might succeed. And also like Y Combinator, I think, put out one statistic that says 99% of all startups that apply to Y Combinator, no, or 80%, something like this. But it was like a major amount, the most amount, like by far, a major amount of startups that apply to Y Combinator. Y Combinator, you already receive funding, still fail. So it was obvious, but still, because we were young and don't have responsibility, we still took the initiative.
I think you had the luxury as brothers that way, because that's a huge thing in terms of, pushing yourself. And again, what I can also see is that you both saw what about outside and coming from Syria, and then, finding yourself here in Germany? The way you look at conflict, the way you look at pressure, the way you look at risk is very different. And I see as co-founders that relationship is different, but as brothers, that relationship is completely different. So I can safely assume that your venture is not just about sort of innovation, AI, it's about that relationship as well, which is a refreshing thing to see. And this is where I want to also bring the ethics part of it, because one thing that really stands out in your work is you're not just talking about AI. You're also sort of focusing on that ethical infrastructure, which is very rare, I would say, because when we look at other platforms, they talk about ethics, they talk about ethics through policy, but the design part, that explanation is missing. And I can see on your website, I can see on Thaura AI how you have gone about, giving a very special attention to what ethically different architecture is when it comes to Thaura. So let me ask you, what makes it different? Is it the data you use? Or is it about the constraint you build into that system, or sort of the output in terms of the intelligence you share? Do you talk about decentralizing it?
So it's in a sense, it's completely different in thought of from the ground up. The model that we're using is GLM 4.5. It's a company, a Chinese company called XAI that released it, I think, 1.5 years ago.
Mhm.
It's a small model, like compared to ChatGPT. They have approximately 3 to 5 trillion parameters. ChatGPT. This small model has 100 billion parameters in total, but uses 12 billion active parameters. It's tiny, and we thought, okay, since it's a thinking model, they use hybrid thinking as a technical term. This will allow us to still get like great outputs while having a very small model that is approximately 94% more efficient. So we thought to ourselves, okay, that's amazing. We should use this. But what about the data sets? Obviously, since it was a Chinese company, it was trained on Chinese data. And whatever agenda they want to push, they would be able to push it. But since LLM fungi the same way, it's a transformer architecture, they are pattern recognition systems. Meaning if you put in guardrails and add in the right context, you're still getting the output that you want. Meaning we use, for example, intelligent tool calling to call collaborating tools. For example, we're collaborating with a company called SourceSplits, which their primary goal is to get all of the sources that are Palestine and Gaza related and actually get the only sourced ones out there to provide to all people that want to read them. They write sort of their journals platform that want to release press in that sense. And our Thaura sort of intelligently tool calls it when it wants to operate any Israeli information and uses this context to answer the question. This way, we're mitigating the data sets that were inputted by XAI, which in the end of the day, it's a pattern recognition system.
Yeah.
This is just source parts. We're trying to collaborate with way more ethical companies that sort of creates then this magical tool that actually is unbiased then, because we don't want to say we're biased.
Yeah.
We are unbiased. The reason Thaura says it stands for Palestine, it's not because it is instructed to say so. It is because it receives the right data and then answers in that sense. So in the sense of, yes, it gives more ethical answers because it is unbiased, but also the whole infrastructure is ethical. We don't use any big tech providers. We're not related in any kind with AWS, Google, or Azure. We currently at the time, because of the low budget, our inference provider is in the US, but they have a strong DPA. For example, DuckDuckGo, which is one of the major privacy search engines out there. They have also a platform called Duck.ai, and they use a specific inference provider called Together AI, which is a privacy inference provider in the sense of, because DuckDuckGo is using it, it just shows you how much they care about privacy. So currently we are using this inference provider to get the inference. That is completely secure. We control the whole infrastructure. And hopefully once capital rolls in, we're able to roll out our own infrastructure that is actually hosted by ourselves and completely controlled by ourselves. But the other part of the infrastructure, which is our business intelligence, is in Europe, meaning every single data set that is being stored is never like going out of Europe and always in operations that we completely control. So in the sense of, yes, we are ethical because we try to not collaborate with the people that try to oppress us. And this way we achieved, I think, the the reach that we have reached so far because people appreciate such behavior.
Yeah,
And all,
I think that's a great explanation in terms of how, when we imagine ethical AI, we're talking about the charters, talking about the guidelines, all those fancy PR related stuff which is out there in their about us and or in their business report. But I'm really keen on machinery, and this is where I think the foundation lies. So in terms of your model choice or your governance, your encryption, your deployment, how do you ensure that your platform cannot be weaponized or co-opted, as you grow further? Because is it a case where you're building on existing,
Yeah.
which you explained to me very clearly? But I really want to. I'm very keen on understanding how you ensure that it cannot be co-opted or weaponized at all.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you cannot ensure it 100%, and nobody can ensure it. Like even if you go into ChatGPT, Anthropic, nobody can ensure it. At the end of the day, everything that is out there on the internet can be corrupted in some way since it's a vulnerability. So what we try to do is right now is mitigate this vulnerability to the lowest risk possible. So we have an infrastructure that can scale to currently 100,000 users. And the reason why it's so small is because we try to ensure that it's as secure as possible. If we would scale it further, it's a little bit harder for us to scale, but we try to mitigate it as far as possible so we can guarantee the people that, yes, we are still in control and we can still prevent anybody from doing anything to it. So in the sense of, but how to prevent it completely, and this is, I think, the goal of Thaura right here, is to remove centralization completely. People should not be dependent neither on Thaura, neither on Google, neither on anybody. There needs to be decentralized architecture in the world for people to be completely unbiased. Because let's say, yes, we are completely ethical and we do want to support the world. That's a good thing. And people should trust us because this is currently the only option to still get sort of equivalent outputs to big tech AI by using a centralized entity, since you need a lot of GPU power. But let's say something happens to it, or we get VC funding and they throw us out as CEOs and try to control it. People still are trusting Thaura, but now it's being controlled by the people they are trying to go away from. The solution to this can only be decentralization. There either needs to be a decentralized server that people can access through, either a end-to-end encrypted server, sort of in the sense of homomorphic encryption, or there needs to be local AI. And specifically, we chose a small model because this is currently the research we're trying to conduct. How can you still get amazing outputs by using a very small model that maybe is even hosted on your edge device? So to answer your question, I think the answer is local AI. And since currently local AI doesn't perform the same way as big AI does, you have to choose sort of the better of the worst. You have to choose a centralized provider. I currently trust Signal for all of my messaging. I also trust DuckDuckGo for all of my search. They're not perfectly ethical, I understand this, but I'm mitigating the risks to passing all of my data to Google or big tech in general. And I hope I can answer the question.
And here's the thing, we're offering Thaura as a resistant technology. I want to migrate people from big tech to Thaura. But then we've gotten some questions regarding, I've heard that there's another ethical AI going on right now. So your idea is already being implemented. But that's not a bad thing. That's exactly what we want. To have decentralization, we need multiple ethical technology. Because right now, actually, we're bootstrapped. And we did have opportunities with investors to actually get our own rented GPUs. But we didn't want to do so because we don't want any third-party influence in Thaura. So they can push their own agenda like Mistral AI is currently doing. So that's exactly for in case that something happens to us. I don't know, someone attacks us. Something happens to us and Thaura doesn't move forward. We need more alternatives. It's not just Thaura. So if there is any other initiative to do an alternative, we're very welcoming for that.
I think you've put your fingers, and both you, Hani and Said, in terms of what you mentioned, collaboration over competition. That's something which has come out very, very clearly. And I think it's also refreshing to see the vision in terms of how clear you are, where you see yourself with this, the impact it's trying to make. Again, the point you mentioned about, you get the seed funding and then you move on and it goes into the hands of someone else and then who try to sort of, obviously in terms of extracting profit or the typical way which obviously Silicon Valley has shown. But it's brilliant to see. But when the question comes around how you're approaching the reality of things like, again, I'm just being a bit technical here, carbon emission. You can't build a model without X amount of dollars. And obviously, it has that carbon emission coming onto that as well. So, do you intentionally, and I can see the moral clarity here as well, do you intentionally avoid that scale race, or do you find you're always on the lookout for an alternative ways to overcome that computing barrier?
We are always looking for opportunities to overcome the computing barrier. In a sense, you always have to play the cards that you're dealt. And currently, the model that we have chosen is extremely small compared to GPT-5, for example. And yeah.
So if tomorrow government comes and shuts down your infrastructure or sort of, completely in terms of what you're trying to do, so what choices you have to make as an organization? Again, I know it's a very, very broad question, but
no, we have an answer. So when we were in Syria, I think 3 weeks ago, we sat down with our cousin and he said, okay, you're doing something very, very dangerous. Like governments don't want you to do this. Do you understand? And I was like, yeah, I understand. And he was like, what if they put sanctions on you or they censor you and they just completely block your domain from their country? What do you do then? The only solution to this is either sort of like create local infrastructure, which at the moment, unfortunately, is not possible since the models are not efficient enough. But the other solution is you use a VPN. You find a country that does support us, and then you use a VPN to access Thaura in that sense. Hopefully this doesn't happen for anybody that is out there listening. Give us a little, at least a year, and then you can sanction us. Yes. What's local rate?
Fingers crossed. No, we need more of this. We need more of this. But if we look at the governments and the approach of the government when it comes to data and AI, like I gave you previously, I told you about how real-time surveillance, we're talking about automated facial recognition, we are talking about monitoring. Again, Amnesty has reported that 29 countries, they have deployed tools against the protesters last year, as we see Palestine growing in every city and the discontent. Now, compare that to what government has, to what people have or what community have, especially in the developing world. We are talking about a smartphone, which is out there, and a very sketchy internet, which is controlled by the government themselves. So when you sort of build the infrastructure around Thaura, do you also take these things into consideration? Where how can people access certain things, and how can the other side, the government or the intelligence, how it sort of in a way also, like you said, resistant to technology. So what does it actually mean in practice for you, looking at these two different stakeholders in and around us, the government on one end and the community on the other end?
So does the question correlate sort of to, like, do you want to understand how we can mitigate from information leaking to the government?
Yeah, I think I would say more liberation, which you talk about, AI for liberation. What could it actually mean in practice?
I'm trying to understand what you exactly mean by this. So maybe you can
So how does your platform enable people, common people? How does it enable common people and their desire to be to use AI in an ethical way, but at the same time?
I know I get the question.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really trying to provide an AI that people can use with a clear and a conscious mind, where they know, okay, I am, like the example for per se, what Said mentioned with sustainability, that we have a much smaller model. I always like to put it in visually, because we have a model that is approximately 93% smaller than big tech's AI, for example, GPT. We are much more sustainable, and we also use a mixture of experts model, which allows us to use certain experts depending on the user's query. And now here's the thing. When you use GPT-5, whenever you put in a prompt or any kind of question, even when you say hi, their whole neural network gets activated at once. And neural network that is about 90% bigger gets activated, and you just waste so much energy, but you don't see it really, because the UI doesn't show it. You just prompt in something, you get a quick answer. But in the behind, it's like me asking you, Tabish, how are you? And you start reminiscing and thinking about your whole life, everything that happened in your childhood until now. And this is a fact that is not clear because you don't see it. But once someone elaborates it, you start noticing it when using GPT. And when I now start using Claude and GPT, I keep that in mind. And it's like the stat you've mentioned in the beginning that 90% goes into the mainstream US AI funding. It's something that you keep in mind now when you start using the AIs. And this is one factor we're trying to put in the people's brain when they use Thaura. And besides the sustainability fact, it's also that we don't surveil them and we don't track them. It's them using it and knowing, okay, it's a conversation that they're having between the AI and themselves, and there's no middleman eavesdropping. And last but not least, and this is something we're trying to perfect, it's not good enough yet because we don't have our own model, is a truthful stance and answers that have no hidden agenda, where the user can actually feel like he's not being pushed by any agenda or not being pushed to keep on with the conversation because the AI wants them to keep going. And this is like the goal for us to provide the user a AI that they can use with a conscious mind.
I think that's a great definition of ethics in practice, and obviously both the back end and the front end. Now, if you don't mind, if I ask you some of the challenges you have faced building a platform like this, and again, I will put that into different basket. Obviously, you gave me a good explanation, both of you, in terms of the computing side of it and how that infrastructure works. But shall we talk a bit about the capital side of it, and as well as the political safety? It's a huge inspiration for budding entrepreneurs and people who have aspirations to take their own thoughts and take their own apps and their infrastructure going forward. So listening from you both, in terms of the capital, because everyone thinks entrepreneurship technology is about money, obviously seed funding we're talking about, but give me your perspective on what capital has been for you and how it has shaped you or enabled you or hindered you.
So capital would be nice. I'm not going to lie. It would be very, very tremendous. It would help us a lot. But in this day and age, you don't need capital to grow. I don't think that's the case. So software has become extremely accessible to everyone. I mean, from no-code tools through coding agents. Even me, like when we built I have built this like extremely with the help of AI. I do all of the infrastructure and all of the architecture, but there is no way I can code so fast to code up this platform on my own. So I have, for example, always at all times, multiple coding agents, like where I give them multiple tasks that they can operate. We even went this far that we saw a lot of people want to use Thaura as a coding agent. For example, there's Claude Code, which was always my preferred coding agent since before I knew that Anthropic had a partnership deal with Palantir. So when we thought, okay, how cool would it to still take the Claude Code front end, but not send any data to Claude? So we sort of like hosted our own proxy of Thaura that takes Claude Code sort of requests and converts them to Thaura requests and gives them back. So people can use Claude Code with Thaura. And we've implemented this now. I always had this like 4 months ago, locally hosted. And we added this to, I think, 1 month ago or maybe 2 months ago to the platform. And I have to admit, for me personally, Claude Code with Thaura, it has been a game changer. Even Claude Code without Thaura, like coding with AI is extremely beneficial. So for anybody that do want to build platforms, I really recommend them to learn the fundamentals first. And I will tell you for a second why it's super important, critical to learn the fundamentals of coding. And then really use AI to help you with the development part. Sort of become the product manager or sort of the senior engineer that tells junior engineers what to do. But the problem is if you don't learn the fundamentals, especially in such a political product as Thaura, you will get 100%, you will get crazy. In the beginning, Thaura, you didn't have to sign in to use Thaura. It was like ChatGPT. You could just go in there and I can immediately see in my console, I was being attacked consistently. Like everybody's trying to hack into the backend. So you start by doing like IP address restrictions where you ban IP addresses that attack you. But you have to take multiple layers further. And this is why, for example, you came to a realization where, okay, there's a reason why Anthropic requires you, for example, to log in before you use it, which makes sense. ChatGPT doesn't, but they have a huge team that helps them to mitigate all of these risks. So it is extremely important to learn the fundamentals. But if you learn the fundamentals, are willing to learn, there's a bunch of content out there to learn how to do a SaaS or anything in software. In that sense, anything really. And if you have the willpower, and you understand the risks, it is an extremely clear path. You will have ups and downs, but once you like notice a pain point, which with Thaura we did notice. That the path is very clear, and if you keep following it, I think you will be successful.
It's a very rewarding path. Which you both are on, I can clearly see. But tell me about the political safety. Tell me about, because you are a rebel. Both of you are a rebel that way, both in your work and in your personality as well, in terms of where you've come from, where you've situated yourself. Have you have you had any sort of issues? Have you had any sort of problems that way without sort of, interfering with what you are trying to do?
Not yet.
Not
Inshallah,
yet, okay.
hopefully never, but I feel like it will come. I'm following the journeys of the Tech for Palestine entrepreneurs, like the founder of Boycat, and he said something very amazing, and I really resonate with that because we share the same religion, which is Islam, and we put God and our purpose at the very top. And regarding our safety, whatever happens will happen. We cannot live with fear. We have to resist. Whether we're going to die in a couple of years or now, we cannot think that way, because if we all think that way, it will not bring us further. And especially us as Syrians, this is what's going on in Syria. Actually, people are too scared to resist anymore. And even though the revolution just happened and Syria is free and the dictator fell, people are too shy to give out their political opinion or their opinion in general. And this is the first thing. Like, we have this one purpose that we're trying to chase. But on the other hand, we have family in Syria. I'm hearing a lot of background noises.
Yeah,
I would
you're
close the
talking
door.
about the family. Sorry, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I have a cousin in Syria. He is a cab driver, and his cab has a sniper shot at his front window.
Okay.
And he has to drive that cab 12 hours a day. And seeing this and knowing what kind of challenge he has and what kind of challenge we have in the West, it's like, it doesn't really allow me to not voice out my opinion, because I have been given all these opportunities and I have to use them to give them back to where I should actually be. I could have also stayed in Syria and had the same place as him, driving a cab 12 hours a day, knowing that this shot could have hit me. And there's a lot of fuel in us. And if there is anyone trying to scare us off, keep trying, because we will also keep going.
Yes, sir.
I think that's a very valid point, and how you use your privilege. But can I be the devil's advocate here? And given, again, I mean to say how you guys have managed to chart your path. And again, you mingle with people, you interact with all sorts of entrepreneurs, you go through that process. Has ever been a temptation to join that group or join that, ivory tower where everything looks rosy within the tinted glass?
No.
Has that temptation come through? And amongst you, who's the more sort of, we got to stick to our path and move forward?
Brother, both. It is, I think, something people have to realize. Everybody is a result a little bit of their environment. Alhamdulillah, we grew up in a way where every time something was unethical, we were being taught not to do it. We were taught not to lie, not to steal, always pick the right path. And sort of it's an instinct to understand what is right and what is wrong. Sometimes, even without thinking about this, you just get the feeling that you understand, okay, this is wrong and we should not do this. So there was never really like, okay, let's join them and actually downplay our people to get the upper hand and stuff. And I think this goes hand in hand with actually not growing up rich. Like, when you know the other side, you understand how they feel, and there's empathy.
Now, the reason I asked that question is because I've been part of this world 15 years. I came from India. And I see so much representation in terms of where I come from. But I see in my discipline, I see in others' discipline as well, how in the name of equality, diversity, inclusivity, how people from our part of the world are now part of the system, which is then oppressing the rest of us in a different way. And given your path, given your, the charter which you have taken, it's a very moral position to take. And this early on, knowing all the pitfalls, knowing the risks, knowing the problems which would come this way. So again, I think it goes hand in hand with what you've spoken about, Thaura. how ethically anchored it is. But then, if you don't mind, there's one question which I have not asked you. This is in relation to the ethics as well. Neutrality. Again, all this comes from the moral position we take, the ethical choices we make. And as an expert, both of you, do you think neutrality is even possible in the world of artificial intelligence?
I don't believe so. I don't believe neutrality is a thing, really. And this is a bold statement, but let me elaborate. I don't know if you've seen the interview with Tucker Carlson and Sam Altman.
Yes, I have.
And he has asked him the question, what his ethical framework is. And he tried to be as neutral as possible. And you see what the end result was. Like, it ended up with him asking, is suicide okay? Would you recommend suicide? And I mean, some countries allow so, and some countries don't. And if you try to please everyone, you will end up like Sam Altman, not being able to answer the question, which is a basic no. Yes, we condemn suicide. We don't want people to do suicide. It's a simple question. And we've also asked ourselves this question. And we need an ethical framework, and we have an ethical framework. We represent with Thaura what we are, and we have a Islamic framework, a Islamic framework that integrates and includes everyone. So we try not to please everyone, because we know that once we get into this path, we will eventually displease everyone. So you have to have your own framework, and this is ours, and we're going to stick with that.
And just to add to this addition, so the goal here is to be, when it comes to information, to be absolutely neutral. There is no room for opinions when it comes to information. I ask, what is going on in Gaza? There is opinions here don't have any place for anything. It's just, this is the information. What do you think? Right? What is obvious? But then, when it comes to opinions, because obviously AI still needs to have some sort of opinions. If you ask it, if you take a picture of yourself, how do I look today? It needs to give some sort of opinion. This is where I think it reflects the sort of the moral framework of the founders. And to be quite honest, since we are believers, it's not just an opinion. We believe this is the truth. So it's sort of, when it comes to opinions, this is what we think Thaura should represent.
No, that makes sense. That absolutely makes sense. And when you link it to the broader struggles which we are seeing, whether you go to Palestine, whether you go to Syria, again, what's happening in Sudan and Congo, there is a very worrying trend. And that trend, we are talking about, people are consuming information which are largely produced by 70%. In terms of, less than 20% of the media corporations are producing that information which is being consumed by 70% of us. So you position Thaura as a platform that helps people tell their own stories with data. So for the audience, could you just elaborate quickly in terms of how does it work in practice?
Trying to think.
So, for example, if we cover Gaza, or if we cover Syria, which is your home country, what's happening out there? There's so much of misinformation out there. You hear from one news channel, you hear from one influencer. Everyone has their opinion. So, how do you help people understand a story with the data you have?
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So, can I say it?
Yeah, sure.
So since we didn't have trained our own model, we're really focusing on putting in guardrails. And one of these guardrails is our tool build. We use intelligent tool calling. And this is not the best approach, but this is the only approach we can work with right now, because we can only play with the cards that we dealt. We don't have the financial resources to build a model yet and train them with our own data. And this is a whole new topic, because it's also a field we haven't touched yet. We still want to get into research and know, how do we train a model with these data, with data that is actually truthful and represents the community and the marginalized voices. Until we get there, this is our approach. We use intelligent tool calling, and like Said has mentioned, we collaborate with these projects like SourcePress or Israeli tech alternatives, for example, like data sets that give us alternatives to Israeli tech and support these marginalized projects and initiatives that are out there. And we reference them whenever these questions are asked. But if you ask me if that's the optimal solution, it is not. But this is the answer we've been giving since we've started Thaura, because there has never been an optimal solution yet, because we just don't have the resources, but we're striving for, and taking that initial step will get us there.
Also to just add a little bit, I love ground news. Do you guys know ground news? I think the way they approach things is I think pretty smart, because they show the most likely bias a specific news outlet have. And I think sort of mixing something like the approach ground news has taken with Thaura, where Thaura shows like, okay, this article, this information I gathered from this news outlet and is more right wing, and this from more of a left wing approach. So do with this information whatever you like. I think when it comes to information, it is extremely important that opinions of the AI have no place in it. They cannot impact anything. We are pro-Palestine, not because we are biased. It's not because, no, I am Arab and I need to support our Arab people. We are pro-Palestine because it is unethical. It is unethical to kill people. It is unethical to surveil people. It is unethical to be a surveillance capitalist, to just look for your own profit and completely disregard humanity completely. So I think this is the numbers talking. It's not a bias. So in a sense of currently Thaura, you can use it without a bias. I think we have used it far enough to say that it gives you information without its opinion. But if you ask it for its opinion, it will give you its opinion.
Yeah, very well said. And
I think that makes sense, yes.
Also, when you talk to big tech AI platforms and mention Palestine and want to write an article about Palestine, it tells you, I don't want to get into that political stuff. Political. Is it really political though? It's basic humanitarian rights. People are dying. There's nothing political to talk about. There's something humanitarian to talk about.
And this is where I think both of us need to come together. All three of us need to come together and demystify this whole political cloud around what's happening in Palestine and a lot of those conflicts as well, because it is not political. It is more to do with the other side of extractive capitalism, which I strongly believe is at play. My last question to both of you, and then we move on to the practical insight and the quick fire round, if that makes sense. So this would be your opinion in terms of, if you look at the most people, in the sector and what is going on, the future of AI, San Francisco, China, Dubai, with so much of investment. But your platform suggests a completely different future. You spoke about decentralization. Again, you spoke about, the intelligence, that collective intelligence where you're looking to collaborate with people. Again, clearly both of you've got that moral clarity. So based on that, do you think liberation movement will actually shape AI? Or it will keep pushing it on the margins?
I think it absolutely will. AI is all dependent on data. And the more we change the data sets that are out there, the more we will impact artificial intelligence systems, since they are trained on all of the data that is inside the internet. I think also when having access to decentralized AI, giving the people understanding that it is possible to not be centralized by anything. I live in a utopia where I think even democracy should not be centralized. There should be not like a couple of people taking all of the votes. I think especially with current tech systems, everybody has a phone. Why can't just everybody vote the rules out there? And in the sense that way we can actually achieve democracy. I think, yes, showing people that even a technology such as AI can be decentralized, I think will push the whole liberation movement further. They will push us further in supporting such ideologies and eventually make the world a better place.
I feel like many using AI nowadays, they're not realizing how bad it is, because AI is pretty clever. These guys on top, they're on top for a reason.
Yeah.
Some people tell me that ChatGPT actually is pretty open and gives out valid answers, and he doesn't really run away from the question. Sometimes he tells me that what Israel is doing is bad in their own way. But even this little, like very slightly amount of tolerance is not forever.
Yeah.
Once they establish themselves, once they are the next Google for AI, like, people say, yo, can you Google this?
Yeah.
They don't know the difference between internet and Google. It's like the same thing. Google is the internet. And I feel like the scary part about OpenAI, for example, once they become the wording for AI, like nowadays people say the ChatGPT AI is the same thing. Once they establish themselves as the monopole, I feel like this is when they can really abuse us.
Yeah.
This is when they can show their real face.
Yeah.
And the liberation has to start from now on, not from when we're already in that position where we are all dependent on one technology that just started to show its real face.
Just if I can add just one little thing to this. If nothing else convinces you to what these big tech companies are doing, look at Palestine. They're literally providing artificial intelligence systems that target Palestinians to kill them. And now you look at all of these big tech companies, Google, AWS, OpenAI, Anthropic, and you see that they're actually collaborating with Palestine. So as a user, what does that tell you? What does that tell you if, let's say, your grocery store next by actually gets all of his groceries from, I don't know, people that are starving and getting minimum wages? For these things, most people, ethical people, I think, will stand up and not tolerate. But when it comes to technology, since it's a little bit in the background, it's a little bit hidden, it's so comfortable to use. It's something they're rather not in the sense of I a little bit understand it because I think most people are not evil. I think if there is an actual alternative to a product that is unethical, I think most people will take the ethical. But the problem is, since the unethical people have so much tremendous power, it's difficult to compete with them. So this is why it's so extremely important that people focus on building ethical alternatives so we can actually compete with the big players.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, and I think with the infrastructure of AI and how it's built, and all these organizations having set themselves up that way, that you have got that out of sight, out of mind kind of a thing where people are not aware of what's going on in the background and the way they're working around it. But yeah, you're absolutely right, both of you. So much of future depends on all of this. So in terms of practical insights, we go to the activists, the engineers, the students, the community organizers, all of them who are listening to you both. Could you give us some principles which they should apply if they are building technology which has a conscience?
Yeah, I would say honesty. Always being honest. If you truly have this responsibility and people are using your platform, then you have to be honest with them because you are not all knowing, you're not all wise, you will do mistakes. And the mistakes that people or the feedback that people give to you, it's very valuable. It's not something that to be defensive about. It's actually something to grow organically with it. And we've experienced this firsthand because we always change something based off support, of advice, and being stubborn and being very, very much true to one's own opinion doesn't bring you further. So being honest about the situation, being honest with your audience and the people using your platform can get you a far way.
Even if it exposes you, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part. It is. And actually, if, like me personally, knowing this, sometimes I still feel like it's difficult to like own up to my mistake because the public is a different kind of room than doing it one-on-one. Because when you do it personally, like when you give me feedback, Tabish, and I admit to my mistakes, I can improve. And this was a genuine back and forth. You try to improve what I'm building. But if you would say this in public per se, with the same intention, and I realize this intention, the people outside, they don't understand the context, they don't understand the intention, and then they like, Tabish just exposed Thaura. And this is where it gets tricky.
Yeah.
This is my experience so far, but I believe we're also going to get better here. We do have a advisor working with us who was a politician, and he's giving us his political experience. And
I think both of you got a fabulous attitude when it comes to building something like this. And I think, I've been teaching entrepreneurship for good 10 years now. I think that the ability to take that feedback and understand that failure is a part of the process. I think I can clearly see in your ethos and principles how it's coming across. So, more power to you as to what you're doing.
Likewise. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm very excited at the prospect of what Thaura can achieve and what it can offer to the world and the young generation who are, all about technology. So let me take you to the quick fire round. 3 quick fire questions, and then we'll close the discussion. if you could tell us one AI tool which everyone should at least attempt to understand here in 2025 as we close the year.
Thaura.
Thaura AI.
I knew that was coming. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm with that. Have you read a book or an article which has actually shaped your thinking for the last maybe a year or so, which has impacted you in what you're doing?
It's hard to say a book or article.
Mm-hmm.
So for me personally, what I can say is I try to think more or try to get feedback in terms of technical perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
So I think reading, for example, generally attention is all you need, which is the research paper that enabled LLMs, was getting like clear foundations on how the whole infrastructure works, the whole architecture. And I think this shaped my way of thinking on how to approach things when it comes to LLM and what potential it has to actually impact people, and in the sense of becoming a new information framework.
I believe you got a quick answer, right?
No, carry on. It's all right.
Okay.
It's lovely hearing you, in terms of diving into your thinking process, how you
Attention
think.
is all you need. That's my quick answer.
Yeah, I would say for me it's the book of life, because I've read a lot of books and I realized at one point that I forgot everything I read, and that was very devastating. So I realized a lot of people are so wise and they've never read books, but what they are doing is they are really conscious and aware about their situation and their surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I think about reading, which also in our Quran is like the first word of the Quran, read. I feel like it means observe, and I really try to read the whole world, the situation, and everything around me.
That's great. Thank you. My last question, then we'll close it off. We'll end on a philosophical note, a very, very philosophical note.
Philosophy.
So as young entrepreneurs, future looks bright. So what is that one hope you'd give to others when it comes to technology?
One hope.
I think
what they should implement, like what they should do when it comes to technology.
Yeah, if again you're in a position, you're in a privileged position where you're doing so many brilliant things, but that positivity which drives you. So the one hope which you feel like, despite all the darkness, all the broken world around us, you still see something which will keep things going and which will keep things forward.
The small choices are the tickets that lead us to the ethical tech goal that we're striving for.
Okay. Little decisions, yeah?
Little decisions.
Yeah.
Like saying no to one platform, switching to an alternative, brings all of us a very far way.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. That was fabulous, Hani and Said. Thank you so much for this conversation. In terms of what AI, the way you've spoken about it, and I love that centralization aspect. And to everyone listening, again, I'll tell you, AI here, in terms of what these brothers are looking to build, with the approach they have, the moral clarity they have, please go through what they have spoken about and look at this episode. And if at all this has spoken to you, please share it. And also, coming from what they have told us, ask yourself, the work which you're doing, who does it empower? Who does it ignore? And again, you also might think about uplifting and building things with a different purpose. And up until next time, keep questioning, keep building, and keep imagining things differently here in the Broken Bazaar. Thank you for listening.